Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from us in Bsure. My name is Olav Helland, and joining me today is Knut Dahle Svendsen, our Customer Success Manager, and also Gunnar Welt, our CTO, is on the line. Today we'll take a look at how you can gain better control of the applications in your Entra ID. And in particular, we're going to see how you can identify and clean up apps that might have been granted excessive permissions. This webinar is part of a recommended action series we've run for some months, where we focus on practical steps you can take using the insights you gain from the Bsure application. About applications, they often have more access than your users, and without proper visibility, it's easy to lose track of who or what actually has access to your data. So let's go to the next one. We'll start a little bit about talking about the benefits of using enterprise applications with single sign-on. Then we'll take a look at the non-human identities in Entra and the types of access these accounts typically have. We'll take a quick look at the threat landscape as well, but most of the time we'll spend inside the Bsure app showing the different reports and how you can use those on this topic. We'll set aside 30 minutes and we'll try to leave a few minutes at the end to answer any questions that might pop up. So you can type those in the chat as we go along. So let's start by looking at why it makes sense to use these enterprise apps with single sign-on. Because this doesn't just apply to the Microsoft services and applications. Most modern third-party SaaS applications support this today. And you can even set it up on your internal applications if you configure them through an application proxy, for instance. So when you connect the apps to Entra through single sign-on, you get centralized access management and authentication. So you handle everything in one place. It becomes easier to manage your users, both when you grant them access during onboarding and also when you offboard users. So when the user leaves, no longer has an account, he automatically loses access to the application. You get better visibility into the usage, reporting, logging, and insights. You get that directly in Entra, and also that's the data we use and show in the Bsure application. And not to forget, you can get stronger security because you can configure conditional access and MFA on these apps also. So it simplifies the compliance and license control. Some of these cost money, and you can track who's using them and not with the data you can pull from Entra. And last but not least, it simplifies the experience for the end users. They get a more seamless experience, so they have one sign-in for all their apps and don't have to remember multiple usernames and passwords for separate applications. Just one single sign-in for all their apps. So that's the benefits. But all of these applications often have their own identity. You can think of it like an application identity, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about now. Microsoft calls these workload identities. It's kind of an umbrella term for anything that isn't a person. So it could be applications, bots, or other systems that sign in and access your resources. In Entra, this includes typically the applications we mentioned and the service principals and managed identities connected to them. But there is also another concept called app registrations. This is simply the definition of an application. So an app registration describes how this app is supposed to sign in and what permissions it can have. The enterprise app, on the other hand, is the instance, the service principal instance of the app registration. So it represents the actual app in your tenant. Each one of these gets its own identity, a service principal, which functions as the app's account inside Entra. And finally, we have a special kind of service principal, which is called managed identities, and gaining more and more traction. These are typically created in Azure, and they are managed by Azure. Can be for resources like virtual machines, containers, function apps, you name it. And they can either be system assigned, tied directly to a single resource. So if you remove the resource, the managed identity in your Entra will also go away. Or they can be user assigned, and then you can share them across multiple resources. So when Microsoft talks about workload identities, this is what they're talking about. So permissions. I don't know if people have seen a picture like this before. This is a window that typically appears when an application requests access to Entra. Very often it's asking for access through the Microsoft Graph. And this example, the application is asking for quite a lot of permissions. And as an admin, it's easy to just click accept on these requests, but it's kind of worth knowing what you're actually agreeing to here. So this app is requesting permissions to something. And when you click accept as an admin, you're granting what's called an admin consent. You're giving the permissions on behalf of the entire organization. So that means that the next user who starts the same app won't have to approve the access again. So it's strongly recommended to not allow users to consent to apps on their own. So, but even though users can't grant more access than they have themselves, it's very easy for unwanted or malicious apps to slip in and quietly read data and send them out of your organization. So always require admin consent for new applications. There are two types of these permissions. Something called delegated permissions. That means that the app acts on behalf of the signed-in user, and it can only access what the user has access to. On the other hand, we have application permissions. Then you grant access to the application, and it can use the data on its own without a user signed in. So when you check these permissions on an app in your Entra, you can see the different types on the different types of permissions. Some are app permissions and some are delegated. But how can you know in advance when you accept this? So if you open each and every one of the access requests when you approve an application, it usually says if it's on behalf of the signed-in user or if it's without a signed-in user. So then you can distinguish between it being a delegated permission or an application permission. So let's move to a little bit about the threat landscape. This is a slide from the 2025 edition of Microsoft's Digital Defense Report. It was released just a few weeks ago. So I'm not going to go through everything here, but we're going to look at a couple of parts. So in this section, Microsoft states that since multi-factor authentication and conditional access have become more common, it's harder to attack normal user accounts, and they are now moving from users to applications. And they also point out here that these types of identities often have higher privileges than normal users, but at the same time, they often lack proper security controls. So, and this is becoming a growing blind spot that's increasingly being targeted by malicious actors. You can also take a little look at the thing on the top right here, where they describe how the attacks typically happen. So either the attackers abuse existing applications that already have too many permissions, or they trick users into installing malicious apps that look legitimate. So those are the typical ways how they abuse applications. It's now like this, since this is an increasing problem, so Microsoft has launched something called Entra Workload ID licenses. It's an add-on license to Entra that you can buy to protect the identities, the non-human identities better. It's I believe it's $3 per protected identity, and if you have that kind of license, you can apply conditional access and other protections to these service principles as well. Not the topic for today. We're gonna take a look at how you can get control of all these types of identities instead. So it's time to move over to the Bsure applications and take a look at what can be done there. So let me share my other screen. So this is our version 2 Bsure Insights. We have a couple of things around applications here. We have this main menu, application usage, and here we can see who has used the different applications in the organization. But before we go there, I want to say something about the data source here. So the Bsure data collector pulls data from the sign-in logs every night. But to keep the data set manageable, we don't store all historical entries. We only keep each user's latest sign-in to an application from a country. So if a user, for example, starts Teams from Norway every day, we only keep the most recent record. But if I would start it from another country, I would keep that in addition to the one from Norway. So here you can view all the applications that have been signed into. There is a lot, and many of them are Microsoft apps. So there is a filter here where you can filter Microsoft app false. This is based on a first-party Microsoft app list. It's not complete, so there will be Microsoft stuff still, but less. In between here, you will find all your enterprise applications that are specific for your organization. Since there are so many, we can take a look and search just to find some we know are here. So I have one called ERP4, and I can see I have 540 users which have used this signed into this application in the time period that's selected in my slicer menu here. I can change that period the way I want if I only wanted to look at, for instance, the previous 3 months or similar. So let me deselect this one and get everyone back. And it's built up in the same way as all our other reports. That's very quick about this one. And let's go look at the cost report. This report will be empty if you don't configure anything. To configure applications you want to monitor cost for, you can do that under customer settings and applications. So what we do here is in the configurations, you search for the application that you want to monitor, and you can say that, okay, this application costs 320 and I have bought 500. And then the Bsure will track how many users have used the application for the time period selected, and you can see how many unused, call it per user licenses you have, if you want to monitor this. There is so here I have some negative ones. So this app 4, I have more users signing into than I state that I have bought licenses for. That was the cost application very quickly. We also have one about where applications are signed into from. So typically you could have applications in your tenant that you only wanted sign-ins to from, let's say, a specific country. And then you can search up that application quick and see where I have sign-ins from. So, okay, I have my app 10 has been signed into from Norway and Sweden. Another quick tip here is to take a look at the, you can use the Microsoft app false filter here as well. Yeah, you get it. So we're going to move to the next one, which is called Applications Overview. It's a very new report. It's just being added these days, and we're in the middle of patching our clients with it. So either you got it already, or you'll have to be a little bit patient, and it will appear soon. So this list shows every enterprise application in your Entra, not only the ones that have usage. So it's a better tool to use if you're going to look for applications not in use. So where should I start? We have the same filter for filtering out many of the Microsoft applications. The application used filter that will state if there is sign-ins from either users or a system. With system, we mean managed identities or service principals. So if I select no here, I will get all the applications that don't have sign-ins. There are Microsoft applications in this list, but you can use this list to look at things you can remove from your Entra ID. So let's take a look from another angle. Let's just take a look at the ones that have user sign-ins. And we can see here that I have 154 of those. And I can see here how many users have signed into the different apps. So this is also a good list to use to see the usage of your different applications. So this system sign-in is also kind of interesting. If I select system sign-in yes, I can see all the applications that's been signed into from a service principal or a managed identity. If I at the same time select user sign-in yes, I can see I have 3 applications where both service principals and users are signing in. But let's go back to just the system ones, and I can select here if I want to look at only the managed identity ones, or if I want to look at only the service principal ones. So from what it looks like here, I have a set of service principal enterprise applications with service principal configuration that haven't signed in much. Oh, that's wrong. It's the last system sign-in is here, and it's today for everyone. Anything you want to add, Gunnar?
Yes, you use that for actually stating if the application is still running or not. So let's say you have a secret or a certificate that has expired, then you will see that the date is not today, and then you can actually take and do something about it. You can also search for apps that had service principals that signs in that is not in use anymore. These secrets are mostly used in other SaaS applications or in your environment in other apps where you can configure it. And then you will see in the security reports that Olav is going to go to now, where these service principals actually are signing in from, meaning where you export your data and who has access to your environment with those permissions.
Great. So let's move on to the last report we're going to touch today. You'll find that one under security and service principles. So this is essentially a list of all the service principles that are used together with the enterprise applications and the permissions they have in your Entra ID. We have classified a risk based on the type of permission. So if it's a permission to kind of everything, we say it's critical. If it's a write permission, we state that it's high risk. The low ones are for read permissions. So a start here could be to go through the ones of critical and high, and go through the list, see should this be here, is it in use? Very often it's backup solutions or maybe SharePoint migrations popping up in this list. Typically, if you migrated SharePoint or maybe Exchange back in the day, someone added a service principal with a lot of access and forgot to remove it. That's kind of a classic. And you can also look for rogue or malicious apps that have more permissions than you're comfortable.
Yeah. And you will also find systems like when you integrate them that developers tend to actually give the enterprise apps way too many permissions just because it's easier than actually scoping the permissions. So let's say if you do an integration with ServiceNow, their documentation says that you should give them domain read write all, directory read write all, which is the equivalent to a global administrator. So actually take a review of the list of the applications, see what they're used for, and see if the permissions are according to what you think is correct, and then adjust them.
Yeah. So another angle, like Gunnar mentioned, is if you know the permissions that you don't want, like you could go and look for the directory read write all. Then you haven't scoped very well. You just give full access to the directory. So that could be one to improve, or maybe the vendor have a new version that have better scoping of the permissions. So one can check things like that. Another thing here is that we have a map showing from where in the world the service principal have access to your data from. So in this case, it's within Europe for all the service principals, but you could very often it's very common to see service principals having access for like typically the US, and then you need to have if you have to be GDPR compliant, and you have to be okay with the data being processed also from the US, and it's easy to miss that check when you just accept the application installation. I can mention one more thing that might seem a a little bit strange, and that some of the service principals are not showing with a location. So in this case, I have 4. These are of the type managed identity, and they don't leave any IP address in the sign-in log, so we cannot track the location of these types of managed identity identities. So, anything to add now, Gunnar? No. I think we have a few minutes left of our time. I think we can round it off and take any questions if there are. And if not, I urge everyone to contact us even if you are a user of Bsure, or if you're interested in looking what other capabilities that the platform has. Please let us know. We can easily find our contact at our website, and I'll also link the website for booking a time with us. Perfect. Then I think we'll round off for today and say thank you for joining, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye. Bye.